Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's session of Basic Hebrew on this 29th day of January 2023. And so for the past couple of weeks, we have been focusing especially on Hebrew verbs. And last week we looked at the Hebrew numerals in connection with Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. Now I'm going to go into another verb form here at this particular juncture. Of course, the forms that we have been going over so far, the perfect verbs, the imperfect verbs, the imperatives, all of those are what we call finite verbs. That is, they indicate action that is taking place in time, serving to indicate what action the subject is performing. But now we're going to move into what we call verbals. That is, these are verbs that function as other parts of speech. So they give an action idea, but they're functioning not as verbs, but as another part of speech. There are two primary verbals, one of which is going to be the infinitive, and the other of which is the participle. Now, the infinitive, which is what we will be focusing on today, is a verbal noun. That is, this is a verbal idea that is functioning in the sentence generally as a noun or a substantive. But then we also have the participle, which we'll look at a little bit later. But the participle is a verbal adjective. That is, it is a verbal idea that is functioning as an adjective. Now, today we're focusing on these infinitives, these verbal nouns. So, going into this, remember how when we were talking about nouns, we had made mention of the fact that there were two types of nouns, one of which was a construct and the other of which was an absolute. And the construct noun was modified by another noun. The absolute was not modified. And thus we had taken a look at some of these examples here. So we had then kol ish, where kol here, that's the idea of voice, ish, man. And so kol then was in the construct being modified by the noun ish. And so thus we would say kol, voice of, ish, man. So a voice of a man. But then we also had kol ha-ish as another example here, where kol is the construct noun being modified by ha-ish. So kol then, construct noun, voice of, and then we had ha-ish, the man, and that then is serving to modify kol. And so thus we would say the voice of the man. So we have then these construct and these absolute nouns. In the same way, for infinitives, for verbal nouns, we have infinitives construct and infinitives absolute. And so thus that is what we're going to be looking at, especially here. So the infinitive construct, these are the ones that you will see usually more frequently. And notice the way that the infinitive construct is pointed. So you've got the three X's there representing the triliteral root. And underneath the first root letter is the simple vocal schwa. And then following the second root letter, you have the O class vowel, either the holum or the holum wow also. The infinitive absolute, notice here, again, you've got those same three letters, the three X's representing the triliteral root. Underneath the first root letter, we have the comates, and then following the second root letter is the holum or the holum wow. And so these then are going to be those typical pointings that you will see. Notice with the infinitive construct, as we would expect, there is that reduction in the vowels because the accent has moved as it's being modified by another substantive. And so thus, that is why here I've described the infinitive construct. It will occur in construct with another substantive, so it will be modified by another substantive. We'll see an example of that here in just a moment. And then also, it may have a preposition attached to it. But the infinitive absolute, on the other hand, it's never modified by another substantive, thus it stands alone, and it also never has a preposition attached to it. Thus, if you see what appears to be an infinitive and it has a preposition attached to it, that lets you know this is not going to be an infinitive absolute, this is going to be an infinitive construct. Then, also here, how do these things function? The infinitive construct always functions substantively. And then, as we indicated up above, it may have a preposition attached to it. If it has a lamed preposition attached to it, then we're talking about purpose. With the beth preposition, it will indicate time, and then with the kaf preposition, it indicates comparison or manner. The infinitive absolute, on the other hand, only occasionally functions as a substantive. Most of the time, it functions adverbially, modifying the verb, intensifying that verb in some way. And it may intensify that verb either by indicating that the main verb is something that occurs repeatedly, that is that durative idea, or it may also intensify the action by indicate a surety to that particular idea. Now, I'll show you what I mean by this. If we can come on over to this particular example here. And so this is Genesis 2:17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And so here, so that's the English text to help orient us. And now here is the Hebrew text. So notice what we have here. U me'etz hada'ath tov wara lo thokal memenu. Ki biyom akolka memenu moth tamuth. And in this particular example, we actually have both an infinitive construct right here. So there is our infinitive construct. And then we also have an infinitive absolute right here as well. And so this gives us a good opportunity to see how both of these function. So let's just go ahead and walk through this particular verse here. So we have then u me'etz. Right on the front here, you can see that we do have that conjunction, the form that the conjunction takes when it is occurring before a beth, mem, or pay. Then, following that, we have the men preposition on the word eitz. So what had happened in this particular instance? So we had the word eitz, and then attaching the men preposition to it. And so thus, the men preposition, this schwa underneath the noon is closing the syllable, and it's therefore silent. Thus, the noon is vowelless, which means that it is going to assimilate. In order to compensate for the assimilated noon, a dagesh forte is placed in the following letter, but that following letter is an ayin. That is, it is a guttural. Gutturals can't take the dagesh forte, so it rejects the dagesh forte, and thus the preceding vowel lengthens in this instance to a tsere. And so that is how we get this particular form for the men preposition. And then here's the word eitz, tree, and it's in the construct here. I know that because it's followed by another noun. So thus we would say, and from tree of, and then we have hada'ath. You can see the hey with the pathak followed by a dagesh forte. So that's the article on the word da'af, knowledge. So thus we have and from tree of the knowledge. Well, because knowledge is definite, that also in turn makes the construct definite. So thus we would say and from the tree of the knowledge. Well, what type of knowledge are we talking about? Tov, wara. Tov being good, then there's the conjunction there, ra being evil. So good and evil. Lo, there's the negative adverb not. Tokal, and so here, notice right on the front, we've got one of our imperfect performatives, Aleph, Yod, Tau, Nun, where, so Aleph, Yod, Tau, and Nun there, where the Aleph would indicate first common singular, the Nun would indicate first common plural, the Yod would indicate third masculine, singular or plural, and the Tau would indicate everything else. So second masculine, singular and plural, second feminine, singular and plural, and third feminine, singular and plural. In this instance, it's indicating second masculine, singular. And it's on the verb akal. And this particular verb, you will see, basically has the idea of to eat. So not you will eat memenu from him. Why? Ki, because biyom, and so here you can see the beth preposition there on the word yom. Yom is here followed by our infinitive construct. Notice the pointing that we have here. So we had said that if we have an infinitive construct, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my 3 letters there, I would see the pointing o. So that vocal schwa followed by the o class of vowel. Well, here is my vocal schwa for a guttural, and here is my o class vowel. The lameth here is actually closing the syllable, and the accent is here. So that means then that this right there is actually going to be the kametz hatuf. It's not the kametz, the long A class of vowel. This is the kametz hatuf, the short O, which has a tendency to prefer closed, unaccented syllables. So thus, I have my vocal schwa, and I have my O class vowel. It has reduced from the holum to the kametz hatuf because of the addition of the suffix there, and that particular suffix being the second masculine singular. So thus we would have then akol, that would be eating of. Then we have the second masculine singular pronominal suffix, you, which in turn makes the infinitive definite. So the eating of you, memenu from him, meaning the tree. So thus, notice what has happened here in this particular instance. We have a construct noun, yom, being modified by this infinitive construct then. And thus it is functioning as a noun. That infinitive construct is functioning as a noun, helping us to see that this is the day where the action of the eating of the tree occurs. And the you here is functioning as the agent of the action. This is one of those things you'll see a little bit later when we get into another example. The absolute to an infinitive construct can be either the agent or the recipient. But basically what we have here in this particular instance, in the day of the eating of you, where that infinitive construct is serving as the absolute to yom. But then if we come on down here to this next line here, moth tamuth, and you can see here is tamuth, and again we've got that that imperfect performative for the second masculine singular, and this is on the verb maweth, or muth in this particular instance. Maweth would be the noun form, but so muth being to die. So You will die then. And then here we have moth. And this then is going to be that infinitive absolute, which is modifying tamuth. And it is telling us a little bit of the certainty of this. And for that reason, that is why the KJV translators translated this, thou shalt surely die. So you can see then, in the day that thou eatest thereof, that would be translating that infinitive construct that we saw. Thou shalt surely, there's the infinitive absolute, die. Now, let me give you another example of these infinitive constructs, because I had said previously as well that the absolute to the infinitive construct can also be the recipient of the action. This one here in Genesis chapter 2 is a prime example of this. So, Genesis 2:19. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Now, for this, I'm primarily concerned with this clause right there. And brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. So this is what we have then in the Hebrew. So, Wayave el ha'adam lir'oth ma yikra lo. So notice here as we take a look at this. So, Wayave. I can see wow with a pathak followed by a dagash forte. So that is going to be my wow consecutive on an imperfect. The yod being my imperfect performative here. So the yod as the imperfect performative would indicate third masculine. There's no U class vowel at the end, so this then is going to be third masculine singular. And this particular verb is related to the verb bo, meaning to come or to go. And here, underneath the baith, we have that tsere there, which tells me that this is going to be in the hifil. So thus, I would translate it as, then he caused coming. So then God caused to come, where el ha'adam, el being unto ha'adam, the human. So then God caused the coming unto the Adam, unto the Adam, lir'oth ma yikra lo. So notice here, lir'oth. And I can see on the front here, we have a lameth preposition. The pointing has changed underneath the influence of having those two schwas side by side, the lameth normally being pointed with a vocal schwa, but the resh here also being pointed with a vocal schwa. Hebrew can't have that, so the first one lengthens to the nearest short vowel in pronunciation, in this instance to the HIckory. Now, notice the pointing on this particular form. I have a vocal schwa here, and then I have an O class vowel there. So that O pointing. We saw that when we were taking a look at the infinitives construct. This is what that is. So this here is going to be this particular form there of R'o. That is my infinitive construct here. It has the lameth preposition on top of it because this is going to indicate purpose of the causing. And in other words, this is telling us why God caused the animals to come to the Adam. So he caused the animals to come for what purpose? Lir'oth, to the seeing of, well, to the seeing of what? And this is where we have ma yikra lo. Ma here is the interrogative pronoun in Hebrew, what? Yikra, you can see kara with the yod imperfect performative there, third masculine, no U class vowel, so this is singular. So what? He will call lo to him. This phrase here, or clause rather, ma yikra lo, is actually serving as the absolute to the infinitive construct lir'oth, and this is telling us, in essence, the recipient of the action. So, in other words, notice here when we come back to this example, back in, uh, let's see, back here in Genesis chapter 2, where here we have in the day of the eating of you from him. In this instance, the absolute, that second masculine singular pronominal suffix, is telling us the agent of the action of the infinitive construct. Here, however, the absolute, this clause here, is telling us the recipient. So that is one of those interesting things. So you have a construct, infinitive construct, it's being modified by its absolute, and that absolute will tell us either the agent or the recipient of the action of the infinitive. And then when you have that lameth preposition here, then that generally tells you that this whole infinitive construct phrase is telling the purpose of that main verb that it's modifying. We'll come to Genesis 11:2 in just a moment, but we also have down here Genesis chapter 29, verse 13. So here we have then, and it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house, and he told Laban all these things. So here we've got another infinitive construct in this particular clause. I'm primarily concerned with this one at the moment because we've already seen the lameth preposition. I'm wanting to show you the kaf preposition on the infinitive construct now. So here we have then, Wayihi Kishmoa Lavan eth Shema Yaakov ben Achotho. So you know Wayihi. You can see the wow consecutive on that imperfect form of Haya with that yod there, third masculine, no you class vowel. So this is third masculine singular. So then here it existed. Well, what is it that existed? Here we have then Kishmoa, Lavan, Eth, Shema. So notice here, right on the front of this, you have the kaf preposition. Once again, that vocal schwa that was underneath the kaf has lengthened because of the fact that we had two vocal schwas side by side. And so thus the one underneath the kaf lengthens. And notice the pointing that we have here. We have that simple vocal schwa, and then we have an O class vowel there. This is just that right there, that's just a furtive pathak under, and it's there because of that harsh guttural. So it's not actually part of the pointing here. So of significant pointing here, that vocal schwa and the O class vowel. So that O pointing, that pointing that we associate with the infinitive construct. And what we have here, the shin, mem, ayin, that is going to be the verb shama, meaning to hear. And so thus with the kaf preposition, we would say, according to hearing of, well, hearing of what? And so here we have Lavan, so Laban, we would say. So according to the hearing of Laban, definite because of the fact that Lavan is a proper name. And then we have eth, shema. This here, this eth, is going to be the definite object marker. So that tells us then that all of this that follows is going to be the recipient of the action of the infinitive construct. And over here, Laban, he is the one who's doing the hearing. So Laban is doing the hearing, and then what is it that he's hearing? He's hearing the Shema, the hearing of Yaakov, Jacob. Well, who's Jacob? Ben, son of Achotho, the sister of him, so the son of the sister of him. So what we have here is then, so then It existed according to the hearing of Laban, the hearing of Jacob, the sister of him. So Laban then is hearing about these tidings about Jacob. And so everything is then existing according to this manner. So what we have in this particular instance with the calf preposition, this is telling us the manner according to which these things existed. So everything existed as it should in accordance with the fact that these things about Jacob were heard by Laban. So, in other words, as we've seen, with the Lameth preposition, that infinitive construct has a tendency to indicate purpose. With the calf preposition, it has a tendency to indicate a comparison or a manner. But then with the Beth preposition, it has a tendency to indicate time. And that brings us here to back to our text in Genesis chapter 11. And so Genesis chapter 11, verse 2, and we can take a look at that here in the English. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. So that's the English text. Now coming on down to the Hebrew text. And so here then is the Hebrew text. Wayihi benasa'am mikedem Wayimtseu bik'ar be'eretz shinar. Wayeshavu sham. So notice here's Wayihi. You've seen this particular form before. There's our wow consecutive on the imperfect. And so the yod here being the imperfect performative, third masculine, no U class of vowel, so I know this is third masculine singular, on the verb haya. So then here it existed. Well, what is it that existed? Here we have binasa'am. Notice right here, I've got my Beth preposition. At the end here, I have the so that in this instance is going to be the third masculine plural pronominal suffix. And that leaves me then with my triliteral root, the nun samic ayin. This here is going to be an infinitive construct. Now, we had said that the infinitive construct is pointed with that simple vocal schwa followed by the O class vowel. You'll notice that this one is a little bit different. We have the comates here and then followed by that simple vocal schwa there. The reason for that is because of the shift in accent due to the addition of that pronominal suffix. The there being that heavy pronominal suffix, and so it does change the pointing a little bit, but this is still an infinitive construct. And the verb nasa has the idea of to sojourn. And so thus we would have then the Beth preposition in, then we have the infinitive construct sojourning of, and then them. So in the sojourning of them. And this here then is telling us the idea of when this occurred. So when the events here that follow verse 2 occur, and they are occurring in the sojourning of them. And so basically it's giving us this idea of an action. Action takes place during a period of time, and so thus the existence of these things occur when this action of the sojourning is occurring. So in the sojourning of them, and them here being the ones who are doing the action, so this is giving us the agent. And then where are they sojourning? Mekedem. So notice here we have the men preposition, the nun has assimilated, and thus we do have that dogish forte there. And then we have kedem, which is east. So from east. So in other words, they were in the east, and now they're journeying from the east to the west. And it's interesting. I could pull up a map and show you this, but the location of the mountains of Ararat are in fact to the east of Sumer, where the land of Shinar was. So, kind of an interesting thing to see that. Then we come on down here and we have Wayimtsi'u. So here we have another wow consecutive on an imperfect, the yod being that third masculine. I have a U class vowel at the end here, so I know then that this is going to be third masculine plural. So then they, and then the verb matzah here is the idea of to find. So we would say then they found. Bik'ah, Bik'ah is a valley. And so this then tells us what it is that they, these people who are sojourning, what it is that they found. Then we have Be'eretz Shinar. You can see the beth preposition there on the word Eretz. It's in the construct here being modified by Shinar, which is the proper name for this particular land. So in the land of Shinar, Babylon, we would say. And then we come on down here. So they found this valley, and then what did they do? Vayeshavu Sham. And you can see we've got another wow consecutive there on the imperfect. There's the yod, third masculine. So U class vowel, third masculine plural. And this is on the verb yashav, meaning to dwell. And what has happened? So this would be the verb yashav. And then once I add that imperfect performative onto it, then we would have had this HIckory underneath the imperfect performative and the yod of the triliteral root, they would have joined together. And as a result, then the vowel lengthens. And so thus we have this idea of ye, um, yeshev, or in this instance, yeshavu there. And so then they dwelt Sham there. So they found this valley and then they settled there. All right. And so that brings us then to verse 3. And are there any questions or comments up until this point? All right. Very good. Sir, do you want me to go on for a little bit or? All right. We'll go on for a little bit. So we have then coming into verse 3. So you can see verse 3 if we come back up here. Mhm. All right.
I was trying to say maybe another 6 or 8 minutes, or maybe 7.23 minutes, something like that.
All right. I think we can manage that.
Engineering accuracy.
Absolutely. All right. So here we have then verse 3. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And so thus, if we can come on down here to verse 3. And so thus you can see, Wayomru ish el re'ehu hava nilvana. So, I'm sorry. So, nilbana levenim winisrefa lisrefa. Watihi lahem halivene, halivena la'aven wiha chemar haya lahem lachomer. And so thus, here we have then Wayomeru, and you can see right there we do have that wow consecutive on the imperfect. with that imperfect performative being the yod there. So third masculine, and we have the U class vowel, so I know this is going to be third masculine plural. On the verb aleph mem resh, that is the verb amer, meaning to say. So we would say, then they said, and then here you have ish el re'ehu. So ish being man, but especially that idea of the individual. So it's kind of an interesting thing here. We have a plural verb. The subject appears to be singular, but that gives you the idea of what is going on here. Each individual is saying this to their friends, as we will see here. So basically, even though the subject is singular, if you will, really it's a plurality because each individual is doing this. So ish el re'ehu. So here you have then el unto, and then who is he speaking to? Re'ehu. Well, ehu, that's going to be the third masculine singular pronominal suffix. And then you have the word for friend there as well. So the friend of him, the near one to him. So each one is speaking to his neighbor, to his friend, saying, well, what is it that they're saying here? And so this here, hava. Now, this is an interesting word, and you can see I've got some of the information for it over here. This is actually coming from the triliteral root yod, he, beth. So that idea of yahav. And what has happened in this particular instance? So basically, you take this idea of yahav, and remember when we were talking about the imperatives, we had seen that those imperatives were formed off of the imperfect form of the verb with that second masculine, with that second person. So thus, if we go ahead and take the second person, imperfect performative, that would be the tau here. And so thus, we would have, but then with the yod there, this would then eliminate, and we would think that it would actually become the te, but in this particular instance, the yod reverts back to the original hey there. And so what they do then is that yod actually drops out, and then when we form the imperative, that tau drops off. So thus I have then what forms here is thus the hav would have been the imperative form, but then they've added this ah there because it is going to be sort of more of that emphatic sense to it. So thus, we have then give. And then we come on down here to nilbena livenim. Notice here, I've got the noon imperfect performative. So that would be first common plural. And then I've got that ah ending, that cohortative ending that we were talking about a couple of weeks back. So this is going to be that first person command, if you will. So let us do this, we might say. And then the triliteral root here is the lameth beth nun. And that is the idea of brick. And you can see I've translated it here. We will brick, or we will make bricks. So we will brick livenim. And you can see the same triliteral root appear back there. So the same triliteral root that we had there, the lameth beth nun, is the same triliteral root there, but it's a noun here with that im masculine plural ending. So we will brick, and what is it that we will brick? We will brick the very thing that is part of that action. We will brick bricks. And then you come on down here and it's the same idea. You can see once again, we've got that wow conjunction that noon imperfect performative, and then the ah there again with that cohortative. And then right in the middle there, you've got sin, resh, pei, saraf, having the idea of to burn. And so, in actuality, do you remember in Isaiah chapter 6 about the seraphim? Well, that comes from this triliteral root. That's why the seraphim there are burning ones. So we will burn cohortative. So let us brick, let us burn. And then we have here as well, lisrefa. There's the Lameth preposition. And then here you've got a noun form of that same verb that we had there. So you have sin, resh, pei with the hey there. So to burning, and we will burn to burning. Well, remember as well how it is that they would make bricks, they would bake them in that respect. And so, in essence, you can see what has happened here. Give, and this is the idea of give of your strength, give of your efforts, give of your time, give of your resources. We will brick bricks and we will burn to burning. And then what happens? Watihi. Notice up here, so up above we had wayihi. Now down here we have watihi. So thus, again, that wow consecutive with the tau imperfect performative this time on the verb haya. So thus this would be that third feminine singular. Then she existed. Well, what is it that existed? We have the brick over here. Lahem. There's the Lameth preposition with the third masculine plural pronominal suffix to them. Then we have halivina. And so notice there, you've got the hey article on the word that we saw up here, the brick. So thus, then the brick existed to them. Well, how did the brick exist to them? Le'aven. And so you can see the Lameth preposition on the word evan there, to stone. So these bricks that they bricked are existing for stone for them. And then we have down here, Weha chemar haya lahem lachomer. And so again, now you've got that wow. You've got the article there. That's the form that the article takes before one of those harsh gutturals on this word khemar, which is going to be the idea of mortar or slime. And so thus, and the mortar, haya, existed. Lahem, there's that lahem again, to them. Lachomer, to the mortar. So these bricks that they bricked existed for stone, and then they used the available slime as well for mortar to them. And so those then were the materials that they used then to build this city and this tower that we will be reading about a little bit further.
Okay,
So,
very good.
all right, very good.
So let's see, there was something I thought of in there, but we need not go there at the moment. We'll wait. Sometime probably in about 1993, we'll get to this chapter in our regular study. So, so, okay.
Very good. I will go ahead and stop the recording.
Mhm.
All right.